Welcome to Learning Aloud, a podcast from the organizational dynamics community at the University of Pennsylvania, produced to inspire purposeful leadership practice and transform organizational experience. I am your host, Zach Davis. Joining us today in our virtual Zoom studio is Tom Interrante, a 26-year broadcast media veteran. Tom has led and developed successful sales teams at CBS Radio, Cox Media, and iHeartMedia. In 2011, Tom joined WXPN, an NPR station in Philadelphia, as the Director of Business Support. He leads a team of 9 and is responsible for designing the corporate business support revenue strategy for the 3 geographic regions that WXPN serves, including the Philly tri-state area, Central Pennsylvania, and Northwestern New Jersey. During Tom's tenure at WXPN, he's led the business support team to the highest ranking revenue of any NPR music station in the nation. Tom holds a Bachelor of Arts degree in speech communication from Penn State University, and very recently earned a Master of Science degree in organizational dynamics from our program at the University of Pennsylvania. He enjoys engaging in any kind of outside physical activity, continuous learning for personal enrichment, and so far has never met a dog that he hasn't fallen in love with. Tom, welcome to the program.
Thanks, Zach. It's great to be here.
So I want to start with your current position. So you're the Director of Business Support. It's a sales-focused position at XPN. And you mentioned before that public radio has unique challenges compared to commercial radio stations when it comes to advertising. You know, things you can say, things you can't say. How is that different?
It's a challenge. It's a great challenge for anyone who's ever sold public media, whether it's public TV or public radio. The challenges are the rules are different. So if you're commercial media, you can pretty much write and say anything. You can make claims. You can make it up. You can sell price. But in public media, we're regulated by the FCC. And their guidelines are the guidelines that we must adhere to. So a lot of times we call them underwriters or business supporters. We don't call them advertisers, but for this conversation, we'll call them advertisers. Okay. The advertisers are just, sometimes they're very apprehensive about coming on board with a public media company because they want to say, hey, it's available for $1.99. And we'll say, well, you can't say that. And they'll say, well, why can't I? Because it's the claim, and the FCC says you can't say that. That's one of the biggest challenges that we have. Another challenge we have as well is that we can't do a lot of promotions. We're not out at restaurants or supermarkets or grand openings. We don't have that we're not a company where we have a big promotion company. So a lot of marketing teams do that, and we don't work with a big marketing team. So we're bare bones, very organic, but we, as our GM says, we carry a lot of weight and we lift more than our weight class. We're a pretty darn good radio station.
Nice. So how does that factor into your coaching, with the teams? Like how do you help them overcome potential client objections if someone's used to advertising on a commercial radio station?
Sure. That's a great question. It's a great challenge, and I love challenges. So I think it's been exciting because what we do is I created a culture of learning. So when I first got there, and I think we may have talked about this earlier in the green room, it was a very underperforming radio sales staff. So I had to basically start from scratch. And I created a science and a culture of learning. So we learned the neurosciences and the social sciences of how people make decisions. And we started basically talking about Aristotle and Cicero and ethos, pathos, logos. We got very cerebral. And it's not about numbers. And one thing I learned in organizational dynamics is if we can't communicate the data and the metrics in a compelling way to a customer that shows them why it all applies to their world and makes their business better, then we failed. And so the data really doesn't matter, does it? And I told them, I told the staff at that time that Google is training their people about storytelling and teaching. And Google is transforming their entire culture into being better storytellers. And we have become storytellers and better communicators and more persuasive and more influential. And that's really one of the keys, one of the staples that we've done so far. And that's why we've had so much success.
So, and I imagine that this is a lot to ask of a team to you're digging into Greek and Roman philosophers and senators and their strategies on how to relate to people and how people make decisions and how to influence them. Talk a little bit more about that. How did the team receive that when you first started to take them down this path?
Initially, there was some pushback. And they weren't really confident that it was going to work because they've been selling numbers for many, many years. I mean, let's face it, if you're selling media, you're selling the numbers. Hey, we have 100,000 people or 1 million people who listen to our podcasts or whatever it is. We can't do that. So we don't have the largest audience. We have a great audience. We have a passionate intellectual audience. So we talk about what we can do, not about what we can't do. And so I created buy-in by having them realize that knowledge is power. So the more we learn about how the human brain makes decisions and the buying patterns that human beings make, the more we're going to put ourselves in a position of power and be more successful. And once they started seeing, hey, this really works. This stuff it's road tested. This works. Let's learn more about this. And then it just, quite honestly, Zach, it just snowballed. Like, oh, we want to learn more. Oh, this is fun. What else can we do? What are we going to talk about this week in our sales meeting? Can I invite people out of the office from the sales meeting? Can I invite people from other organizations? Can I invite people here? Can we have some guest speakers? We want to learn more. So it just snowballed into a factor where the knowledge was just, wow, we want to keep doing this. And it just keeps going. It keeps flowing.
That's great. And from our earlier conversations too, I feel like that process itself, that storytelling, that lifelong learning, I mean, that sounds a lot like your passions. It sounds like you leading from example and getting the team to adopt that. Is that fair to say?
It is. I mean, that's a great observation. I think that as a leader, I think that the followers that you have on your team really look up to you, and they begin to talk like you, and they begin to act like you and feel the way you feel about things. And it really stokes the fires of curiosity, I think, when the team is learning in a collaborative manner. What I do is what I think is pretty unique is I will not talk much at our sales meetings. I will have the staff talk more. And sometimes, and I've been doing this quite often, I will have one of the sales reps run the meeting while I'm there. Sometimes, if I'm not there, I definitely will have one of the sales reps run the meeting. And what I learned also in my classes at Organizational Dynamics is that when you teach something, you really learn it. And now my sales staff feels the same way. When they teach something, they are learning it because you have to prepare for it the night before or 2 nights before. So that really engages them into the learning process. So like I said, that really stokes the fires of curiosity with everybody on my staff. I don't want to walk into a meeting. If I'm running that meeting, I don't walk into that meeting saying, okay, here's what I think. I think everybody should wear brown shoes. Say that, okay? But what does everybody else think? Well, you've been in sales. Everybody's going to say, I think we should wear brown shoes because it becomes groupthink. And I don't want that. I want the ability to lean back when I walk into that meeting and really give them the psychological trust and mutual trust. and to continue that journey of self-discovery. And the way we're going to do that is not by me always being the person teaching or learning. I want them to do that as well. And that creates more of a cohesive team as well. And I'm a huge sports fan. And then I really look up to a lot of coaches and how they coach. And I'm all about the team.
Nice. Is there a particular coach whose philosophy resonates with you, or whose methods that you tend to lean on, or that you draw inspiration from?
Well, my new guy right now is Joe Girardi. I always admire Joe Girardi, but I'm not a Yankees fan, but now I can really root for Joe Girardi. And just, I think it was this week.
Well, sure, he's in the right color pinstripes now. So
right, exactly, right. Yeah, he's come to his senses. But they had a team meeting, which I read about the other day. And it was only, the meeting lasted 15 seconds. And I'm thinking, what did he say in 15 seconds? All he did, Zach, was he said, I support you guys. We're a better team than this. Don't let it get to you. Go out there, have fun. We're a great team. We can out-hit anybody. Now we have a great relief staff. We traded for some guys. We're stronger than ever. Let's go out there and kick some butt today. And that's when they won 5 or 6 in a row. So, yeah, I mean, leadership takes many forms. So there are some football coaches I look up to. I mean, there's some baseball coaches. There's some basketball coaches. One of my favorites, and I was kind of young when he was a head coach, but I learned a lot from reading his books, is John Wooden from UCLA. Mm-hmm. I mean, that man won, I think, 11 national championships consecutively. That's unheard of.
Yeah.
So I've read a few of his books because I admire that.
Sure. No, it's great. And I love the way you shared that with the team, having the team members themselves run the meetings. Has anything in particular jumped out at you? Have you ever been surprised by something that the team has come up with, something you didn't see coming before together for one of those meetings?
There are a lot of concepts that we talked to. There's so many concepts that we've talked about. So to answer your question, we've talked about grit. We talked about being mindful, changing mindsets. We talked about persuasion, influence, negotiation. Like I said, logos, pathos. We talked about so many concepts. So the one that really jumps out at me is the storytelling. Initially, and I have one of my sales reps, he was very doubtful about, why are we talking about storytelling? Why do we need to learn about storytelling? Because storytelling resonates with people, and leaders are using story to replace old strategic plans nowadays. I mean, storytelling, I always tell my staff, we were ahead of the curve. I mean, this goes back 4 or 5 years when we started talking about storytelling. Now, if you watch a TED Talk, 3 out of 6 are probably about storytelling. So, storytelling really resonated with our team because we have to tell stories. We want people, I tell our staff that, and I tell everybody in our organization that I think we're in the emotional transportation business, if that makes sense. So if you're marketing a product, you're probably going to want them to experience the product. So you want them to be a participant in that story, not a passenger. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
It's sort of like, think of yourself, okay, so I'm flying the plane now. I'm not a passenger on that plane anymore. I'm now flying that plane. So that resonates with people. Nice. So when we tell stories, we want to, again, start with the logos, the logical structure of that story. And then we want to go over to the ethos and create credibility and enhance trust and get right brain thinking. Because when people make their decisions based on right brain thinking, they're more emotional. We want them to get emotional about XPN. XPN's a great radio station. but you have to really acquire a taste for it. So we help them acquire that taste. And then with Pathos, we make it emotional. It's an emotional experience. Listening or being a business supporter on WXPN is a very emotional experience, because when you're at our festival, people who are at our festival will come up and hug the business supporters. They hug people from Subaru because they are supporting their favorite radio station. There's so much passion involved when you sell through passion and through storytelling. And I don't see anybody else or that I know of that's doing this in the Philadelphia radio market right now. So we take a lot of pride in that, and our sales team takes enormous pride in that.
Yeah. Well, and you made a comment earlier about the listener base, right? You have a very active and engaged and intellectual user base. So, you need to take an active and intellectual and engaging approach to the supporters. And I imagine that this approach tends to breed longer term business supporters. I'm guessing that these are these are longer relationships. Once people start,
Without a doubt, Zach. We have sustainable relationships. We cultivate deep professional relationships. I can text like 10 of my clients right now. It doesn't matter who they are. We become friends, and that means a lot. It means so much to both parties. And we have very loyal business supporters, some that have been with us for 15 years, 14 years. And one thing we never talked about was that in radio, the attrition rate is 33%. It might even be higher now with the pandemic. The attrition rate might be 40 or 50 or 60% in media right now. Our attrition rate's very low compared to most media stations, because we have lasting relationships that our sales reps have built with our clients. Our clients are amazing. And I think it goes back to, like I said, it's the narrative transportation. It's that we're in the emotional transportation business. We aim for, and when I'm leading our team, I'm aiming for their heads and their hearts. We're not aiming for their wallets, because if you aim with the intention of the heart and the minds and the gut, the wallets will follow, so to speak. But I believe in relationship capital, and my staff does now as well.
Well, and it's great. And it sounds like that culture internally just translates into the interactions that your team's having with the clients. So it becomes just the way in which your team conducts business internally, externally. It's the norm. It's not and when that happens, then you get things like, I love that phrase, emotional transportation. I've never heard that phrased in that way before, but it makes a lot of sense when you break it down and how your team is able to connect, because you have what you're selling is space on a radio station, is advertising on a radio station. There are other radio stations, so you need that differentiator. And in times like this, when if all you have is space, well then you're no different from any other radio station that's out there. So I love this way that you've been able to kind of cultivate that difference. So as a sales leader, and I've some experience with this as well. How do you keep the team? How do you keep that culture, that knowledge-based culture? How do you keep that authentic? Right, you have so many new ideas that are coming in. How do you create a culture where those new ideas build upon each other instead of building to the point where they're overwhelming, where it's just like a new flavor each week? How do you blend that together into a cohesive culture?
Sure. It's sort of like, general managers, one of the areas where general managers need to excel is creating the vision and the strategy. And once you create that vision as a GM or a sales manager or a major leader or top level leader, you need to talk about that and reinforce that. And it needs to be constantly reinforced. And so to answer your question, we build upon it. we look at it as a pyramid. So the base is the relationship and connecting. And we even talk about how you can earn charisma. There are multiple layers of everything we talk about with the influence and the persuasion and grit and mindset. So we layer them and they keep building up and they cross-pollinate. And that's what we do in the educational environment that I've created. Everything is cross-pollinated. Everything works together. It becomes an ecosystem. And our staff understands this is our own little ecosystem. And then it kind of permeates throughout the organization as well. Then programming picks up something, or marketing picks up something, or IT picks up something. So yeah, it's not only the emotional transportation business internally, but it cuts down and minimizes silos internally as well. Does that make sense?
It does. And so, the culture of success that you built on your team, it sounds like has spread to other facets of the organization, has made the radio station as a whole better.
Yeah, we've seen that. There's tangible evidence of that. We have a very outgoing team, and obviously they're in sales, but they've learned how to read people. And I challenge them, read people. When you're in the kitchen, when we were working physically at 3025 Walnut Street, we'd be in the kitchen. So read this person. Tell me about that person. Do you know their name? Is it an intern? Where does he or she go to school? And I challenge them, how do you read people? And as you know as well as I do, as a leader, you need to read people and influence people. And so I want them to learn everything that I have learned in grad school. And one of my reps, he says he feels like he's getting a free grad school education through me. And that makes me feel good. And all he has to do is buy me coffee every day. But so that's the only charge. But I think to answer your question earlier, that it's fascinating that I have watched this sales staff that was totally disjointed and totally siloed from each other, that hardly talked to each other, become a cohesive, high-performing team, and that wants to learn everything they can about the social science, and I call it the social science of selling. Selling is a great social platform for anyone who wants to be a general manager or a leader, because you get to learn people, you get to work in relationships and develop and cultivate relationships, and you just learn so much about it. It's a great, great business to be in.
Yeah, and I think honestly, sometimes sales guys get a bad rap because they're trying to pull one over on you. You get the classic, the used car salesman approach. You're trying to sneak one past somebody, and sure, there are definitely some elements of sales that are out there and may deserve that reputation.
Right. But, and we take pride in that. We're not your typical stereotype salesperson. Everything is customized. You talk about sales people, like other commercial radio stations will go, and here's our package. And advertising agencies will tell me that they know that every Tuesday the commercial media stations have their sales meetings, because at 10:15 they get calls from the TV stations and the radio stations saying, oh, we have another package. We just came up with a package. And, Zach, we don't do that. Everything's customized to what the needs are of the underwriters. And people like that. We personalize it.
So how do you balance the pressures of being a sales manager, sales leader? Right? I mean, sales is a blessing and a curse, and that there is data galore, right? I mean, there's data to track, there's goals. Black and white. You hit the goal, you didn't hit the goal. So how do you balance the pressures of managing that sales environment and hitting the targets with that personal development angle of your teams and keeping that culture, that knowledge-based culture alive?
Right. I think that success breeds success. And so in 2011, we started to have some success. That was my first year. And then it began, like I said, like a pyramid. It just kept growing and growing and growing and going towards the top. And each goal got bigger and bigger and bigger. And as a manager, I believe as a manager, I'm very intentional. I'm a situational based leader. So I adapt to what I need to do as a leader. And to answer your question specifically, I've had to adapt my styles to a sales staff where they didn't really want to sell. They didn't feel a need to sell, to a sales staff that really wants to sell. Sometimes I feel like, they have so much autonomy now, and they love that autonomy. So with success, they got more autonomy. So that's one area that's tangibly more positive to them. It's an easier culture to live in. We change the culture together. We work together through situational based leadership as to what I need to do. And what I mean by that, Zach, is that when I say situational leadership, I think every situation is different. And my metaphor for leadership is that it's sort of like playing golf. And I'm not a good golfer, but if I had a golf bag, so I don't know, maybe you have 12, 13 clubs in there. You're not always going to use your driver. You may use the driver on the first tee, but then for a par 3, you might use an 8-iron or a 9-iron, whatever is needed. Sometimes you want to putt, sometimes maybe you have to chip it up there. And as leaders, I think to have sustainable success, we have to adapt ourselves and really continuously learn how to get better as managers. Mm-hmm. And I've learned since I have become a situational based leadership, I know how to handle certain things with my emotional intelligence. I think another aspect is emotional intelligence, the self-awareness and managing oneself. That is so crucial as a manager.
Yeah, and knowing it's such a critical element to the success, knowing what club to use when, right? Knowing when to apply the pressure versus, what different type of situation and how to adapt to that, and, leading by example, right? I mean, and that feeds right into what you were talking about around a custom approach with your clients. Now, if your team is experiencing a custom approach to them, or even to different situations, maybe with the same team member. So, what they're seeing day to day in the office or in interactions internally is then absolutely what they're being asked to do, translating that externally.
Right.
So, I can see that culture, and you're being a bit modest about this too. I mean, we talked a little bit about this as well. We talk about theories, and we talk about getting employees engaged, knowledge-based culture, and it's a great thing to have at work. And it's even better when that thing creates a ton of revenue for the organization. Right. So your sales staff, your team had the highest ranking revenue of any NPR music station in the country, right? So F19 was huge. So all of this stuff we're talking about, building culture, ties directly to outstanding revenue results for the radio station. So can you talk a little bit more about that? I mean, this is sure. Based leadership in action.
Yeah. No, basically it all came together for us in F19. We've always had, God bless our GM, but he loves aggressive goals. So we've been aggressively growing it since 2011, and F19 is like, whoa, baby, that's a big goal. So we all came together and said, how can we do this? What are the goals? How can we overachieve this? How can we continue our education? How can we use everything that we've learned? Mm-hmm. How can I coach you better? How can I mentor you better? How can we create better relationships? It all came together like a culmination of everything in 2019 for us. And a lot of it, I think, had to do with the people on my staff are just amazing. They want to learn. They work so hard. They work pretty much 24/7. They don't have to. Hopefully, HR is not listening. They don't. No, I'm just kidding. They're not really working that hard. but I'll get emails on Sunday night, or it's just amazing. And some of it you can't teach. Some of those intangibles, as you know. So we've been very fortunate. And as I said earlier in this podcast, our GM says we lift a lot for our weight class. We always have. And I go to public media conferences and they're like, wow, you work at XPN. What's that like? You guys do a great job. And I'm thinking, man, you have no idea how hard it is. It's so hard, but it's so rewarding as well. So, and I love what I do, but when you aim for the hearts and the minds, man, you're going to win, whether it's internally or externally.
Yeah. So I can't. I mean, it's like you're acing a group capstone, right?
Yep.
I mean, the whole team put this together, and
Yep.
not only do you have this great culture and people enjoy being a part of it and they're contributing and they're learning and customers and clients like you and want to work with you, but it actually delivered a higher result than what you expected and maybe even what you thought possible at the beginning of the year with those aggressive goals. Because that's the one thing that's a constant. You're always rewarded by great sales performance with a higher quota.
Right. Exactly.
No one ever lowers that quota for doing well. It's always one direction. No, that's great. So I really enjoyed how you kind of built that culture, amongst your team and how it is, spreading and knocking down barriers and expanding, the station is growing as a result of that. You mentioned a little bit about the attrition rate and how the pandemic has affected things. Has that influenced? I mean, now there is no in-work environment, right? I mean, the in-work environment is how we're conducting the podcast right now. It's in Zoom. It's in video platforms, audio platforms. How do you maintain this culture when you don't have that in-person interaction with your team and with other teams?
That's a great question. What we've done is we've talked a lot. So my sales meetings have always been 9:00 on Thursdays. We still have that, but I added a meeting every Monday. It's called the Monday Morning Huddle. And we just check in with each other about 9:00 and we talk about our weekend and what's coming up and what we have coming up during the week. And it's more of a psychological factor because people feel isolated. Everyone feels so isolated right now. And I don't want them to feel isolated. I feel like as a leader, it's my job to make sure they don't feel isolated. So what I do is, I have 7 sales reps plus 1 assistant plus a traffic manager. The traffic manager is the person who traffics the commercials. So I have 9 people who report to me. Every day I'm on the phone and I don't have a headset. So I think I'm getting tendonitis in my left elbow because I'm on the phone seriously all day long. But I want to do it. It's difficult, but I need to be there for my team. And I don't want them to ever feel like they're going alone on this. And so I try to be on every Zoom call that I can with them when they're talking to their prospects, or I'll go out and wear my mask and we'll go see some people in person. But we talk about how to be resilient. I bring in Harvard Business Reviews about how to be resilient. And we talk about that through adversity, you become stronger. And they love when I say this, and now some of our clients have used this, but I tell people every day I feel better. And they're like, why? Because we're one day closer to a vaccine. And if you think about it that way, we're closer today than we were yesterday. So thank God,
Yeah.
But it's tough. But I think through crisis, you become more of an effective leader. I think great leaders are formed during a crisis, like a Churchill or a Lincoln. I read a lot about former leaders. I read a lot about Lincoln. I read about Churchill. One book I read was called Leading Minds. And I was reading a lot about Pope John the 23rd, who was Pope for 5 years. But I read about how he led. So it's kind of fascinating to read about leaders and how they lead in a crisis. So that's a great question.
Great. I appreciate this. Now, I'm not going to turn this into a business review, but we're at September 1st today. So what's the outlook for F20? Are we on track? You guys going to smash that goal for this year too?
No, you got to be honest. If you find one, you let me know. No, I'm not gonna make it up. It's a challenge. It's the biggest challenge along with every sales manager friend that I have in the nation, has ever seen in our lifetime. And I think it will make us stronger. But it's a major challenge right now. And we just take one day at a time. Seriously, we're doing better than I thought we would do, because I have a relentless team. Mm-hmm. They are relentless, but they're very professional as well. So yeah, but it's not going to be, and F20 is not going to end well for anyone that I know of. Even the sports teams are getting crushed. I mean, the Eagles, and no fans, and yeah, it's tough.
I think challenge is the biggest understatement of 2020 so far. But I think that, if anything, we've learned that, the things that you've been doing with the team, leading by example, helping them, that autonomy that you mentioned, and helping them, embrace the concepts of resilience. I mean, it sounds like that team culture is going to survive, and the results may not be there, but that doesn't mean they won't be there again in the future. I mean, it sounds like that foundation is really strong, and I think you've provided a number of examples of how you're leading by example and modeling that, and the team's feeding off of that, the station's feeding off of that. So I've no doubts about XPN and its future. I think you guys are doing a great job.
The team is built they are resilient. And they're sustainable. So yeah, I think they have a great combination of soft skills and hard skills. And we work on the soft skills all the time.
That's great. I want to shift gears slightly. Steve and I have introduced a new component into season 2 of Learning Aloud. We call it our rapid fire questions. Now, unknowingly, you may have already answered one of them, but you may change your answer based on what I ask now. But so feel free. But curious about the first thing that comes to your mind as I roll through a series of 6 questions to help give our listeners just some more insight at the man behind the mic on our Zoom platform here. So, first question: what's one thing you'd most like to do in your life that you haven't done?
I would like to be the general manager of the Phillies. Is that a problem?
It's not a problem. I'm currently not the general manager of the Phillies, so I see no issue with that at all. All right, number 2, in your opinion, what's one thing the world needs right now?
Leadership.
Question 3. If you were back in school today, thinking about starting a career, what would you want to be when you grow up?
I would say, if I had to do it all over again, I would become a politician and I would run for president.
All right, question number 4. What hobby or activity outside of your work brings you joy?
The greatest joy I get, and it's not physical, it's watching football, and I'll be real specific. The greatest joy I get every fall is sitting there and screaming at the TV watching my beloved Penn State Nittany Lions, and that's not going to happen this year. So my joy is gone, but that is my joy.
So question number 5. What person, living or dead, has inspired you the most?
I would say, this may surprise you, I would say Joe DiMaggio. And I'll tell you why. Do I get to tell you why? Or are we still going? Yeah. Because he was the first Italian superstar in baseball. And he's probably still and will always be the greatest hitter in the history of baseball. And he also got married to Marilyn Monroe.
All right. So question number 6. What's the last thing you read?
The last thing I read, it's a book called Peak. Have you ever heard of it?
No, I haven't.
It's called Peak, The Secrets from the New Science of Expertise. It's about how to get better at everything you do. It's about learning why, like, for example, Michael Jordan was so great of a basketball player, or, you know, it doesn't matter. Like, why was Roosevelt such a great president? What did they do differently? And it's really an intriguing book. So yeah, it's called Peak by Erickson and I think Robert Poole, I believe.
All right. Sounds great. We'll include the link to that in the description for the podcast. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. All right, Tom. So you've survived the 6 questions. As we start to wrap up, is there anything that you want to share with our listeners about upcoming projects, things that are next on the horizon for you?
Sure. So one thing, a little shout out about what we're doing at XPN. We're going to have the countdown that we do every December. It's the 2020 greatest songs of all time. So listeners can actually go on xpn.org and vote for their favorite songs of all time, which I did 3 nights ago. So if you want to know, you're going to have to go to xpn.org what my favorite songs are. So you were going to ask me, and I'm not going to answer because you have to tell them to do that. And people always ask me, like, once you get your degree, what do you want to do with your degree from Penn? And I know what I want to do. My aspiration is to be a general manager of a public media company or maybe even a commercial media company. So that's what I want to be when I grow up.
Fantastic. Well, Tom, I wish you luck. We will include the link to xpn.org in the description of the podcast. So be sure that you check that out. Vote for your top. And this is any song you want. These are
any song. It could be Jingle Bells. It could be, you know, Old Lang Syne. It doesn't matter. Any song.
Fantastic. So we'll include that so our listeners can can also capture their votes. Best of luck in your future endeavors. I really appreciate you taking the time with us today. I mean, it definitely took away a lot from your approach with the team, from that learning culture that you built, from the business of emotional transportation, as you so eloquently described, and how, you know, that culture internally then led to bigger and better things within the station, led to better relationships with your business supporters, which has led to better revenue for the station and just a better overall experience. So, you know, those small things really are the big things and the big contributors to the success that you and your team have had. So thank you for taking the time to share that with us today.
Zach, it's been a pleasure speaking with you, Zach. Take care. It's been a lot of fun.
All right. A special thanks to our technical producer, Dan Shields. And I'm Zach Davis with Learning Aloud, a podcast for the organizational dynamics community at the University of Pennsylvania.